I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, Community Practice Lead at the Exchange Lab. For the next 4 episodes, we are going to take you on a journey of an Agile team. This month, I am talking with Jake Morris, a learner's journey learning about change. He's currently the Senior Scrum Master for the Wildfire team at the Ministry of Environment. He has been working at the Exchange Lab for over a year, first with the invasive species team and now with Wildfire. I've appreciated working and learning from him. We offer a lunch and share once a month at the lab. It is an opportunity for each team working at the lab to share what they are working on, what is working and what could be improved in 5 minutes or less. In Jake's first time sharing for his team, he took us through a system of creating priorities for whom to connect with. He called the Web of Connection. It helps create awareness for his team members to know how much time each person has throughout the day. That's the kind of person Jake is, constantly giving us new things to play with. And our team ended up trying that out with our work for the next few months. With that, I would like to introduce you to Jake Morris. Hey, Jake.
Hi, Ari. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Great to have you. So let's begin. What was your path to becoming a Scrum Master?
Well, Ari, I started off working with the Road Safety Initiative team as a product assistant. There, I was just doing general kind of reception duties and executive assistant type duties. My executive noticed that I had a knack for coaching, and through our one-on-ones, he found out that I actually coached football outside of work, and I put a lot of time into that and how I did that. He took that, and later on, as we'd worked together for a while, he said, "Hey, we need a Scrum Master for this new team. You've been working in a Scrum team for about 8 months now. I think you're kind of understanding how this works. I want to give you an opportunity to try and be the Scrum Master for this team for a couple of months. If it works out, we'll get you the training to do so." And that was kind of how I started. Between just picking up and learning from the other Scrum Master that I worked with, to actually doing the certified Scrum Master training, and then eventually the advanced certified Scrum Master training. I've kind of just learned from everyone that I work with at the lab and through government.
So you didn't come in already knowing how to be a Scrum Master per se. This was the beginning.
No, I didn't even know what Scrum was when I joined the project. So when I joined that Road Safety Initiative team, it was my first introduction to Scrum. A guy named Matt Loisel was our Scrum Master, and he kind of showed me the ropes, gave me the intro to everything, and then I got to see how it worked and how it really aligned with like my way of thinking, and like, why can't we just try this? Which was always something that I found through my career, was just there's a lot of hesitancy in just wanting to, like, let's just give this a shot and see how it works for a day, a week, a month, and depending on the scale of what you're asking to do. And with Agile and with Scrum, I found that there was a lot more openness to just like, hey, why don't we just do this differently for a week and see how it goes?
Well, that must be exciting. It must have been exciting for you, for someone to have that mindset to be able to actually play that way.
Yeah, that was really it. And I noticed that team specifically was built really, really well around people who just understood that we're here to try things differently, to not do things the way that they've been done in the past, because the way that they've been done in the past, though successful, like we're all here, we're all working for the provincial government, there could be a better way, and we took that shot, and I believe it's worked out pretty well for that team, even though I've moved on a few years ago, but they've successfully launched products, so can't say more than that.
It's great. Moving into Agile, way of thinking requires change. Why do you feel change is so hard for people?
So change is difficult. Anytime you're trying to do something new, there's an aspect of change involved. There's people who kind of have entire careers based around change management and the different philosophies around that. For me, I think it comes down to like one core thing, and it's that for someone to change, they have to, in a way, somewhere within themselves, admit that what they were doing before is wrong or isn't the best way to do something. And that can be hard for people, because if they've been doing something for say 4 or 5 years, in some cases 15, 20 years, and they've been doing it the same way and they've had no issues, they have good write-ups about them and all that, It's really hard for them to say, hey, you're wanting me to change this. Like, no, I'm not wrong. I've been doing this for so long. I know what I'm doing. So for them to then change what they're thinking and move forward can be really, really difficult. So I think at the root of change it really comes down to having to admit at some level that, hey, there's a better way, or I'm doing this not the best way possible right now.
Yeah, that is really hard and humbling if you could get to the place to make the next step.
Yeah, exactly. Especially early on when you're trying to do a change and it's not working out. And though you can see kind of the sparks where, oh, things are working better over here, but what we tried to do really, really isn't working at the beginning of the workflow. Like, I don't have an example on hand, but I've just noticed this, like with people, like that they'll hold on to, especially if they're hesitant to change, they'll really, really hold on to the defeats rather than the small victories. So it takes a lot of coaching for individuals to understand, hey, no, look at these little victories and look at how they're adding up and how they're saving you time, or how they're saving the uh, branch money, whatever it might be, and looking at it from a bigger picture to understand, hey, let's not change what's working, but you're right, this part isn't working. What can we do differently there? And then it's going through another change cycle and saying, okay, yes, again, we didn't do this exactly right, but that's okay. How can we change to be a little bit better? And slowly but surely get to really, really good.
Have you had an experience that you remember where someone was in that state of like, okay, pulling out all the negative for each one, but then they hit a spot where it did add up for them and they flipped?
Yeah, I noticed I worked with folks who come from policy backgrounds, both with road safety initiative and when I was working with the liquor and cannabis regulation branch. And I found that the way that policy is written and pushed through government is pretty set in stone. Like, depending on what type of policy it is, if it requires legislation changes or anything like that. Like, there's things that need to happen in order to push policy through. What I would say though is those people, in my experience, really, really have a set way of trying to do things. And when you try to tweak that just a little bit, it's a little unnerving, and I think that's natural. But what I found was finding the similarities between policy, like the way policy is written, and Scrum or Agile is really what helped me connect with those people. And one of the big things is that writing policy in itself is a very, very iterative process. They start with a rough draft and they go and they review it with a working group. They get a bunch of feedback from their peers who they respect, and then they take that feedback and they incorporate it into their document. And they go through that cycle a few times. One of the things that I did find while working with those people is sometimes you can't get all those people in the same room. So they were like tagging people individually, getting conflicting feedback. And those were where there was really hard points for them to move forward, because you have these two individuals that you respect and you've brought them into this working group and you're trying to accept their feedback, but they're saying opposite things. And then in order to make that work, you have to try and get those two people together. So one of the big things that I pushed for while working in those two spots was any discussions around feedback need to happen as a group. And when those discussions happen as a group, those clash of ideals where those two people would have handed in contradicting feedback can now just be talked out in the room, instead of going through a long email chain between three people where you're trying to figure out what's the latest message, what's the latest version of this that we're trying to work with. Instead, let's just talk about it in the room. Let's be people first, figure this out, and then move on to the next thing. And I found that, especially with the liquor and cannabis regulation branch, that was a big thing that helped them, was just saying, hey, if we can't all meet at this time, we're just going to move the meeting. We're not going to say we're going to have it with half the people and then have half the people email their feedback in, because I know that doesn't work. So let's wait and let's make sure everyone's available and make this a priority.
I was thinking back to the earlier part where you said became a Scrum Master because your director, I think you said director, said, oh, he noticed that you had the ability to had coaching ability, and you said, yeah, I've coached football. With this getting your team to the point where they're past like going through the nitpicky in the beginning because you're worried that if it's not working right in the beginning, it's not working. Does your love for games and coaching does that come out a lot, like fixing these puzzles, like and stuff like that?
So what's funny is the part that I really love about coaching football is actually a part that I don't really bring into my work. It's a lot of the strategizing and like the X's and O's of football as a game that I really, really love. And being a Scrum Master and learning all of these people orientated skills has actually made me a better football coach, which is something that I can really appreciate because I I I found like though I was really good at doing the problem solving bits and understanding the X's and O's, really relating that to people and getting people to buy into it was somewhere where I was struggling a bit. So uh, the learning that I've done as a Scrum Master has helped me in that way. But I do think that there is a connection between like, hey, let's find what's not working. And the same thing applies in football. Why isn't this play working? Is someone missing a block? Is someone not running the right route? What is not right and why are we missing here? And the same thing applies in the example that I was just giving with the palsy pit. It's what's not working here. And what we found was the delayed feedback, and it's getting feedback at different intervals where it's contradicting and not allowing people to talk it through. And that's something where me learning, hey, let's just make sure everyone's in the room to talk about this can transition to actually over to the football field, where when we're introducing a play, you usually introduce a play with a position group, and then you introduce it with the rest of the team, just so that people are worried about their piece overall. But instead, something that we've done differently since I really got into being a Scrum Master was introducing it to everyone, so everyone can see what the goal of the play is overall to start, and then getting into the X's and O's and like why this person needs to block this person and all of the nitty gritty details.
Well, because then you're going to get full buy-in from the team because they all get it.
Exactly. And it's something simple, but for some reason it wasn't something that clicked with me immediately. So it's something that I've really taken away.
Thanks. There's an agile principle about building a team around motivated individuals. What are your thoughts on building your team with this principle?
I strongly believe in this principle, but I think that it should be a little bit more specific. There's a lot of motivated individuals in the world, people who can get things done, people who can get things done on their own and who are very, very good at it, people who can be contracted out to do very specific things and blow you away with the job that they do. But those might not be the people that you want on your Scrum team. The people that you want on your Scrum team are people who are motivated to try things differently, to buy in when it's not their idea, to just jump in and say, you know what Ari's saying is a really interesting thought. Let's do it. Let's do it. I was thinking the opposite, but let's just try it this way for now. And there will be heated discussions because you'll have people with strong opinions, but the core piece there is you have to have people who are motivated, but not just motivated to change and motivated to agree with their team. Where some people, if they come from a really strong background where they're really, really good at specific things, they just feel that the way that they're going to do it is the only right way. And those people will be fantastic at doing what they do, but they might not be the best fit for a Scrum team. And I've experienced that in my work, and that like I've been on teams where we've had very cohesive units where we want to work together and we want to figure out what's our path forward together, rather than what are the individual ideas that we have fighting against each other. And I think that instances where people really get stuck to this is my plan, or this is the way that we have to do this because this is the way that I've done it before, really just they throw a wrench in the dynamics of the team, and it can be very hard for people to get past, especially when other people on the team are trying to agree, but they've collectively agreed to something else.
So what you're saying is this is actually a team. Like it really is a team. It's not individuals. It is, you need people who are ready to be in a team and talk things through and connect and be right at times and be wrong at other times, but work as a team to go forward.
Yeah. And that's where the motivation needs to be. It's motivated to move forward as a team, not just Like the principle is building a team around motivated individuals, and that's true. It's just it's what that motivation is that really matters, and digging that out in the interview process or the hiring process is something that I think, to be honest, could use work in the public service. It's hard because we have unions and we want to make sure everything is fair, but there's an aspect of like the individual and how they fit into the puzzle that I don't think is consistently um, grasped in that process or
Yes.
scored. It's not scored. There's no score for it, right? So, but I understand it because it's so subjective. It's hard to really put a score to and justify.
What do you think of
Okay.
trying things differently?
I think trying things differently is the essence of what we're really trying to do while being agile. It's jumping in and saying, hey, this is how things are done currently. What doesn't work about this? What frustrates you? What part of this do you look forward to the least? And then targeting that and saying, okay, let's make a change. Let's just try something different for a week, for a month, however long it takes to get some good feedback. And then when we get that, we can look back on it and say, was this better or worse than what you were doing before? And making those changes to the way that we're doing things before we make changes to the tools that they're using, I think is really important. In doing things differently, we're learning what actually does work currently that we don't need to change, and what doesn't work that we do need to change.
So some people will be familiar with Sprint who are listening to the podcast, but others probably aren't. So can you explain what a sprint is and how it affects building a product?
So a sprint it's a time box, essentially, a time box where you go from designing to deploying. Basically, it is a short period of time, typically with the teams that I work with, 2 weeks, and I think that's very common. Some teams can get it down to 2, where they have very granular, or down to 1 week where they have very granular work. But in, say, a 2-week time period, you go through saying, hey, this is at the beginning, we plan it out. This is what we're going to accomplish. We start to decide, okay, this is how we're going to try and get this done. We do it, we test it out, and then we share it and we get feedback on it. And that's what's the most important part, is we get to that point where we have something done enough that people can say, hey, I like that. Hey, I don't like that. Why did you do this instead of this? And those are the conversations that you want to have at the end of the sprint to then decide, hey, what's the priorities for the next one? So what a sprint really is it's about delivering a small amount of value that can be talked about in a short period of time.
Do you find that experience, even in the beginning, hard or easy for your team and the people you're working with who are outside of the team, the stakeholders?
I think it can be hard, especially with a newer Scrum team. It can be hard because you're really, really trying to get something to share that's exciting, that you can get stakeholders and customers to be like, wow, this is going in a cool direction. And oftentimes at the very beginning of a project, that's really hard to do because there's so much setup involved, like setting up the front end, the back end, like all of those bits and pieces that different programs that need to be set up in order to do something else. All these steps involved that at the end of the first sprint or something, you might only have like a web page that says hi, or maybe you have something that's really, really simple, or even worse, the team doesn't get anything done. And it's a learning experience, but you have nothing to deliver. So then you go to sprint review and you're trying to share nothing. Instead, you can kind of just talk to, this is what we did, and we're going to share something with you next time. And that can be a really hard pill to swallow for everyone involved. For the team that's been working for 2 weeks to show something off to not get to, for the stakeholders who have been waiting for something, to see something, to see nothing, it can be hard. And it's one of the things where I think that's how a lot of projects start, and why there's more turmoil early on. People are like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. But then as the team gets more comfortable and how to break up the work so that they can get it done in time and done early and often, the stakeholders start to see more and more things in your sprint reviews. That's where you start to see the development of the team and how they're producing value more and more frequently. And that's when you get the buy-in where people are like, oh, suddenly everyone has ideas and they want to just keep shooting ideas at you. And the product owner needs to say, this is a good idea and this is a bad idea. So it's this big mesh where there's feedback coming in, and sometimes it's too much, and then it's being funneled down into like concrete things for the team to work on that then they push out, and it's the stakeholders like, wow, this is great, and then they're inspired for more ideas, and that's where that big kind of cycle comes from.
Once the team start to be good at sprint reviews, do you see the team culture improve?
Certainly. I think when teams start to understand like why we're doing sprint reviews and they start getting really good feedback from stakeholders, like the culture of the team improves because we're focusing in on improving the lives of our stakeholders, at least their work lives, because we're giving them something new that's useful. And that's a big kind of cornerstone of what I think we try to do at the lab, is always providing like something chunky and valuable frequently. And teams will want to be innovative and come up with like shiny new solutions, but sometimes it's the simple things that it's just, for example, the Wildfire team, we passed over, we put to production a tool that we're calling the 90th percentile calculator. And essentially what it does is a user inputs weather stations, and with that, they get a bunch of values related to wildfires and these wildfire indices. Previously, they didn't have anything that did that. So when a community would make a funding proposal, they would get a consultant who would put a bunch of numbers together and then come up with these indices. And there was no real way to go back and check their work. And then basically the provincial government would say, okay, we think you deserve this funding to do some wildfire prevention activities. And there's no real way for us to say, hey, this area is more deserving than this area based on the numbers and based on these indices and risk factors. But now with the standardized tool that we've given them, which was, to be honest, a pretty simple tool, it took longer for us to get through our privacy and security checks than it did for us to build it itself. The consultants use this tool to produce the numbers, and they say, hey, these are the weather stations that I used, this is the date range that I used. And then on the government side, the wildfire officers can say, okay, I've inputted the information the same, and verify, you know what, this person has done a good job of the way that they're verifying this information, and this municipality needs this funding, so let's send it over.
What are some of the unique activities you have tried to bring your team together?
So for me, I try to do things differently a lot. Maybe I experiment a little too much in some ways. And some things I do keep things pretty standard. Stand-ups have started to become pretty standard in that we figure out what everyone's doing. We work off of our backlog screen, especially while we're working remote. We work off of the screen and say, hey, this is the ticket that I'm working on. This is what's happened recently. This is where we're going. But being remote, we've also incorporated an extra amount of time into our stand-ups where it's just about banter, talking about what happened in the weekend, what movie we just watched, recommendations for something to have for dinner because everyone's sick of having chicken and vegetables. It's stuff like that. In sprint retrospectives, I think is where I try to be the most creative, because that's where the team really gets to be kind of themselves the most. It's where we're supposed to be our most transparent, is with each other on the team. So I like to start things off with like energizer activities. One that I recently did, it was probably a few months ago at this point, but I called it Bite Your Tongue. And essentially it was really simple. Someone has a phrase in front of them that they have to say, and they have to try and say it while biting their tongue. And it's silly, but people get to be silly, and that silliness lets them open up a little bit more once the more serious conversations start happening. Yeah, I think trying to do things differently in those sprints, those Scrum ceremonies is really important, because otherwise it's something that becomes dreaded. And then checking in with your team to ensure, like, hey, are you excited that we're doing new things all the time, or are you guys trying to get down to down to business more frequently, and finding that nice kind of Goldilocks zone is really important.
Nice. What do you think of trying things differently?
So I think trying things differently is really the base of what we're trying to do at the lab and in Scrum and being agile in general. There's all of this changing technology around us, and if we try to do things exactly the same with all of these new inputs and new tools, we're eventually going to end up with the same stagnating results. I think when we get new tools for us to use, we need to try to do things a little bit differently. An example of this for myself is Miro. I wasn't super familiar with a tool called Miro. It's essentially a giant whiteboard that's digital that everyone can access at the same time, and you can see each other's cursors and move around. Originally, I did it just like a whiteboard, and I was trying to figure out, okay, like this is kind of like being in the room still, because we're working remote with team members in India, Vancouver, in Victoria, but in different areas. We needed to figure out, let's really engage in this tool, and let's jump in and figure something out that's different. So one of the things that we did this past retro was we played musical chairs. It was a good way to learn the tool a little bit better, in that like you're having to move things around for people who are newer to using Miro, and it also was just a fun thing to start off our retrospective with.
So thanks again for taking the time to share your journey. As being a Scrum Master and sharing about change, there's lots of information shared, and there's more to learn as we move forward in our journey through these 6 stages of Agile. Please connect with me. I'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and suggestions. You can email me at ari.hirschberg@gov.bc.ca, and thanks for listening.